Today's session is called Ethics in AI Marketing. Now, this is a sensitive topic for many organizations looking to expand their operations and their use of AI, artificial intelligence, in their marketing processes, systems, campaigns, and activities, whilst at the same time retaining an ethical stance. So these two things are not necessarily things that you would imagine going hand in hand. An ethical approach to a non-human centric form of marketing. So we need to explore quite deeply how to integrate the concepts of doing ethical business and ethical marketing into our emerging use of the technologies that are presenting themselves as opportunities in our work. So why does ethical AI matter? Well, because obviously we're seeing currently a rapid adoption of AI, artificial intelligence, across all forms of interaction with customers. I mean, it really is reshaping how we interact with our customers throughout their customer journey, as we might describe it. And for many organizations, this raises ethical concerns in terms of the way that we present ourselves from an authentic, transparent, and honest and true perspective. 77% of customers or consumers worry about AI bias and privacy, according to a research program by Capgemini. 77% worry about AI bias and privacy. That's an interesting one, isn't it? When we're starting to rely quite heavily on the processing capability and power of something like artificial intelligence, the ability of these systems and processes and emerging technologies to handle and manipulate our data, giving us really powerful evaluations of the next steps, the priorities, and our strategic plans going forward. And yet, at the same time, there are these concerns coming through that there might be a bias in there, or actually, how private is my data? The good news, and it isn't all about fear, the good news is that regulatory bodies are now starting to tighten AI laws across the world. In the US, the AI Bill of Rights is now coming to fruition. In the EU, in Europe, we have the AI Act. And a lot of these will start to give us both guidelines, but also regulations. In other words, setting the standard for ethical AI, the way that we're using these emerging technologies. In many ways, though, these are still not sort of fixed in stone. These are still things that are going to evolve as the technology evolves as well. So my recommendation, and you'll kind of hear this as we go through this talk, will be to keep very, very close to how those things are changing and make sure that you have a route into some of these regulations, because if you're watching and monitoring, then you'll always be using the latest best practice thinking. A lot of organizations have seen a readjustment, I guess you could call it, from some of the ways that they've been using the technologies. I mean, a very well publicized one was IBM's withdrawal from facial recognition AI due to ethical concerns. We see a lot of these kinds of things, rearing their head in the media and in some of the commentary in the marketing channels and communities. Again, though, what I would reiterate is don't be fearful. This is a very, very new and emerging opportunity for marketers. We're all figuring this stuff out as we go. So the fact that, you might be feeling a little unnerved by some of the stories and some of these things that are coming through. And obviously when big name brands start to readjust and reposition themselves, there is this kind of I guess second nature to say, oh, well, maybe we need to wait, or maybe we don't need to be doing that kind of thing or getting involved. It isn't about stopping. It is about adjusting and continually watching and monitoring stuff. So that is something I'm going to really be pushing quite hard as we go through this. And in many ways, I guess what we're trying to do here is to create some kind of sort of process, I guess you could call it. I mean, some people will call this an ethics framework. And so if we were to explore it in that way, so that we would always, if we're using artificial intelligence in our marketing activities, both strategic for planning and tactical for delivery and for campaigns, then if we're working to a framework, we've got at least something we can compare against, but we've also got something that enables us to continuously improve it. And the it obviously would be the framework or the system or the process. So this is kind of quite important stuff, really, is to create something that allows you to confidently say, look, here's our journey. This is what we're working with. We're not perfect. We're not there yet, but we're actually on this journey. And here's our kind of progress monitor, if you like. So our framework here is going to be sort of touching on many bases and many things, but it's here to show our progress and to give us the confidence that, hey, we've got this. We're not just subservient to this changing thing and we're always playing catch up. We're actually kind of in charge of how this is going to roll out. So what might you put into an AI ethics framework? Well, the first thing really would be to avoid discrimination in AI-driven decisions. So you're looking to put a benchmark in to set some standards really for fairness and bias prevention. And we're going to look at how we might do that in a little while. We also want to make sure that AI processes are understandable to everybody and anybody who's going to be using them. So that involves internal staff and colleagues, as well as the customers who are the recipients of the output from our AI. And that will be about making things very transparent and easily understood. So making them, well explained, if you like. Also, we need to ensure that we are responsibly handling our customers' data. So not putting a sensitive piece of information or a customer record into a publicly accessible AI. So if you're using, for example, I'm just going to talk generically here, but the free version, if you like, of ChatGPT, then that is not ring-fenced. That is not sort of protected, as it were. That is publicly available, and that enables the AIs like ChatGPT to actually learn from the kinds of inputs and the kinds of queries. So that is in itself important, but it's not where you would put sensitive data, commercially sensitive data, or customer records. So ensuring that we're putting customer data into AIs that are secure and protected so that we can ensure privacy and data security is really important. So we need to put that into our framework. We also need to define who is responsible for any decisions that come through from an evaluation or recommendation that our AI might make for us. So accountability and governance needs to come in. Again, that's important because if we're just jumping on, well, ChatGPT said this, or well, Copilot told me to do it, that clearly isn't going to be strong enough. It's not going to be robust enough if challenged. So let's think about some actionable steps here. I want to make this a practical talk for you. The first thing would be to implement some ethics audits in the workflows that you have within your marketing. So look and kind of map out, and process map is a phrase that you might want to use here. Process map out the general workflows that you have where you're potentially most likely or currently are using AI, and see where there might be some little loopholes, maybe some gaps, or maybe some sensitivities to fairness and bias, transparency and explainability, privacy and security, and of course this accountability and governance. And establish a cross-functional AI ethics board or team to oversee the strategy. Now, that sounds like something only a big corporate would do. And in many ways, that kind of phrasing is kind of implying that. But even if you're in a small to medium-sized business, it's important to make sure that it isn't just marketing that's driving this. Marketing might be leading it, but actually they're not the sole recipients of the value here or the challenges. So get others who are involved in these workflows to be part of this team, exploring some of these touch points. So if you've got a sales representative or a customer service representative or somebody from operations coming into this cross-functional team to oversee how this stuff's playing out, that would be probably a very sound idea. Now, AI bias, let's kind of go through some of these things sort of one by one, because these are some of the more significant things that may crop up as you're doing this ethics audit. AI bias, and it can be quite a hidden risk here because AI algorithms, the way that the AIs, the artificial intelligence, the agents, operators, whatever you want to call them, they can reinforce any biases that are factored into the data that they're learning from or the data that they're interpreting. So if you've already got a bias in there, be it, this is how we do our business, or a societal bias, if your AI is being trained on biased data because it's already skewed, or if you've got a certain preference yourself, and as you're starting to prompt engineer how the AI is going to translate that report or that spreadsheet, then you are automatically, just by default, starting to bias it just from the language that you use or the terminology. So the AI is going to actually reinforce and almost exaggerate any biases that are already in your organization. And AI is only as unbiased as the data that it's trained on. And again, we kind of know this, and it's obviously common sense, really, isn't it? So as you're doing your audit the AI training data for diversity and representation gaps. So be really mindful over the kinds of information that you're putting into AI, and actually then take an honest, really open view as to, actually, is this really unbiased information? Well, not really, because look, here's the history, here's the crumb trail behind how we've created this report or this particular interpretation of these numbers. And what we need to do is kind of almost backtrack and get them to be as unbiased as possible. And use fairness aware AI models that actively detect and correct biases. So you can actually put into your prompt engineering, as you start talking to your AI tool or platform or assistant, you can start to talk to it in a way that automatically self-adjusts. Say, if you detect any biases within this from a gender perspective or from a societal perspective, can you please make an adjustment and tell me where you've made the adjustment? So get the AI to kind of work collaboratively with you to identify and also then repair, if you like, because that is actually what we're trying to do here, repair those bias little pinpoints. So it might be throughout your data, it could be just in little moments of time. And that's why often we see these things as a little bit of a hidden risk. And what we're trying to do here is to basically serve all audiences to an appropriate level. I mean, ideally equally, but this is probably for many of us going to be a journey. We're probably going to find that this will take time to enable us to avoid any kind of bias towards racial bias or gender bias or income-based bias or any kind of personalization that we're doing. It needs to be representative of an open and ethical and honest position of our relationship with that particular persona, if we've been doing some persona profiling or segmentation. Now, I've always been a huge advocate, and for those of you who know sort of the work that I've done, and obviously if you've listened to any of my previous webinars like this, you'll know I'm a huge proponent of the concept of customer personas, because they do allow us to build this kind of personalization within our marketing. But actually inherent within that is bias, because we're trying to bias it towards that persona. And of course, we're not doing it to enable us to generalize. We're doing it to, hopefully, if we're doing this in an honest and ethical way, we're doing it to build the relationship on the terms of what our customer, our persona, sees as valued information or a valued or immersive experience. So we're doing it for all the good, right reasons, but we need to make sure that it is genuinely ticking the boxes of value and that it is fair and it's not unbiased information, but it's actually fair and true to the audiences that we're serving. So make sure that any decision making, make sure that any AI platforms or message threads that are existing, and of course, for many of us now, we know if we continue with an existing message thread in, for example, something like ChatGPT, it's got all of that back data, it's got all of that history of the conversation that it's actually drawing from. And of course, there could already in the conversations be those inherent biases. So we've got to be really careful here. And I think, again, it's not saying just be fearful. It's just about being mindful, be really on point with this and be awake and aware every time you have a conversation with your AI that you might be adding to or moving away from this ethical stance. So again, not fearful, but just really conscious of the kinds of conversations that you're having. Now, many AI models operate as what we might call black boxes, where even developers can't fully explain the decisions that are happening. In other words, they're little kind of closed shops. And in many ways, what we need to be doing is having really open and transparent processes actually, coming through in these processes that we have with the platforms or the AIs that we choose. And this is one area that the technology providers, these AI platforms, be they OpenAI with ChatGPT, Microsoft with Copilot, Anthropic with Claude, Gemini's Google, obviously offering, all of these platforms are on this race to actually making this stuff better. So it isn't just solely your responsibility. It does come hand in hand with the developers and these platform owners and providers. And a lot of this stuff is kind of almost unknown. It's hidden. These are kind of, as we call them, opaque algorithms where we're not quite sure how the AI came to that decision or that judgment or that recommendation, but we need to get to the bottom of it. So what I would recommend in terms of helping these platforms, yeah, even the very big guys, when you might be thinking, well, what's my little prompt going to do to help the AI learn? Because obviously there's millions of people doing this, but if we collectively all do this, then we can actually be helping the AIs to self-regulate and self-learn. So maybe challenge and say, okay, you've given me this recommendation. I'm almost ready to go with it and maybe recommend it to my business, but can you uncover, please, any kind of biases or any kind of ethical issues around this? I'm not sure how you came to that recommendation. So can you tell me how you came and there's some of the inferences that you've made? So ask the AI to almost self-justify why it came to what it came to. Ask it to unpick the decision making that it's gone through. In essence, that's a really interesting journey for it to go on too. So it'll kind of self-learn, it's self-learning at the same time as give you a view into a little window into actually how is it doing what it's doing. Now it's not going to reveal its crown jewels. It's not going to tell you how it works, but it might tell you some of the process into what it's decided on and how it came to those decisions. And again, as part of your sort of co-training, it's training you, you're training it. That could be a very interesting little exploration, if you like, as you go deeper into your interaction with your AIs. Now, customers trust AI when they understand how it works, so much as we would understand a lot more and be able to trust our AI in terms of the recommendations if we knew where those decisions were coming from. It also comes through very loud and clear when your customers actually see this playing out in a real world scenario. I mean, Spotify. When it's added, why you're hearing this feature to explain personalized recommendations. That's an interesting one. Go hunt that one out because it actually explains its background philosophy. And it almost gives you a little hint about the algorithms that are in play when it says, we're going to recommend this to you, but not to this other person over here, because, you're hearing this recommendation because, and it actually explains and justifies it, which gives you then the confidence that, okay, well, that's feels more personalized because they're actually listening to me. They're watching what I'm doing. And okay, there's a bit of AI going on here, and that's super clever the way it's done it. So yeah, I get it. Okay, I trust it a little bit more because I'm giving that transparency a chance to kind of talk as well. So the actionable steps there would be to really kind of offer maybe some kind of AI transparency dashboard or some little kind of pop-up that says, actually, in this customer-facing application that we're presenting to you, customer, you've got an option here to click on maybe the little I button or little eye icon there to sort of see why we're presenting it in this way, or this is where we're going to give you some extra value behind the decision that we've taken to serve you with this particular part of the journey. And it just enables that little bit of understanding, but also the little nuance behind that step in the journey that might be requiring the customer to do something, maybe click here, or maybe just justifying your behavior in the relationship. That's an interesting one. And of course, you could, if you really, really went to town with this, you could provide opt-in and opt-out options for any AI-driven recommendations. So if you make it very clear that, look, this is how you normally transport yourself through this particular part of our journey with you. But actually, if you click this button, which is an AI recommendation, we're going to say you can opt out from that if you don't really want to do it. But here's an option to go somewhere a little bit different. And that could be part of an experience. Maybe you're, I don't know, hosting an event or something, and you're giving somebody a chance to sign up for some sort of pre-event information. And it's an AI-driven thing, which is personalized to them. And it gives them the option to opt in or out of it. So they might want the standard vanilla generic version, or maybe opt in to the AI version. Now, that obviously then gives a little bit of a different spin to the relationship. But if you use it cleverly and really mindfully, that could be some real added value. So, definitely worth thinking about that as an option there. Now, of course, as we're talking about all these things, there is this big question mark about AI's reliance on what we would call big data. So, to do that level of personalization, we're obviously going to be collecting data and information from the customer as they interact with us, as they buy our products and services, as we connect with them in various channels. We're going to be collecting data. So, our data collection, as always, there's nothing really new here, but it must be ethical. So think about customers' data protection. Privacy is not an option. It must be a fundamental AI decision principle. Google's CEO there. It's not an option. It must be a fundamental AI design principle. So the actionable steps that you can take here is to very much implement this kind of privacy first approach where, yes, you might want that piece of information or that little pocket of data or, that particular customer record, but instead of just grabbing it because you then want to use it in your next campaign, you actually start, rather than thinking about the campaign, you start by thinking, how and where am I going to store this? Am I going to use this with AI? Am I going to keep this secure? And that's your over an abiding kind of starting point rather than just, hey, I've got this customer's email record. Great. Now I can send them an email campaign. And of course, as marketers, that's what we want to do because there's a growth opportunity. But maybe that's now a secondary option. And the primary option, because of this intimate relationship we're trying to form through AI with our customers, maybe it's the data and the ethical kind of holding of that data and the security of that data and the privacy of the concern, obviously, of the customer that it will be held private and secure that actually should come first. Now, there are many guidance, there are many regulations in here. Obviously, we've got GDPR, which is now being reinvented to accommodate these emerging AI laws, and there's CCPA. There's a whole bunch of other things that you can have in play here. And so, literally upskill, fine, go and do an AI search using some of these regulations and see what the latest AI principles and best practice are for this kind of privacy first AI approach, because then you cannot be challenged as being well, they're not particularly secure, they don't really look after my data. Because if you're putting this first, that is absolutely how you can position yourself. And it is going to be really, really important going forward. We're already seeing the death of third-party cookies. I mean, Google's retirement of third-party cookies really is reshaping this whole thing. AI-driven ad targeting, for example, is going to come from first-party data. So first-party data is the data that you hold, not third-party holding it. So it's not in some disparate, distant platform where, you buy a little subscription or you basically loan that data and then you're getting served with advertising options on somebody else's data, and then you have to basically pay for the privilege. This is a chance here to do this right, hold first-party data. So all of those really important, nuanced, personalized little pockets of data about a customer, you can hold those. That's called first-party data. Holding that in your own databases, again, driven by privacy and security, to enable a robust and secure AI to integrate its activities and algorithms with what you want on the outside. So you can do contextual targeting. Instead of just behavior tracking from a distance, from afar, you can actually do stuff that's targeted to people in first-party data, so the data that you hold. So you've got your customer records there to hand. They're yours. They're in the palm of your hand, literally, nice and secure. You've got them. You're looking after them as an ethical marketer. And now you can use the AIs in a secure way to really start targeting on a personalized basis. So there's no kind of coincidence that third-party cookies are on their way out, AI is on its way in, and for the ethical marketers amongst us, this is an opportunity to strike with good, wholesome marketing. That's what we're talking about here. So best practice marketers will win out. Those marketers who think the old world is still going to be in play have missed the boat. They've already missed the boat. It's already sailed. So you're listening to this, you're watching this, so you can take a real competitive edge here by doing this stuff. But of course, it's not all going to be plain sailing. There's a lot to do, there's a lot to think about, and we need to build this from the ground up with this secure data holding and then start to build the AI stuff into it as part of our workflows that I mentioned earlier. But ethical AI does require this human accountability, particularly when in those workflows you are starting to enable and allow automated decisions. So the AI then decides what time to publish this piece of data, or it decides to serve customer 123 differently to company or customer 456. They get a slightly different view because the AI decided to serve them with different information. So who's accountable when that goes wrong? Who's accountable when somebody gets some biased information or some information that wasn't appropriate for them? Who's accountable there? Well, it's always going to be the human. So we've got to establish AI accountability roles in our marketing teams. Again, it's not pointing the finger and saying, oh no, they're going to come for us when the AIs fail and the robots, take over and get it all wrong, then everybody's coming for me. It is about saying, look, this is a collaborative thing. This is a collaborative thing where even if you start to allow your AI agent, your AI assistant, or your chatbots or whatever to do things without your direct interaction on a day-to-day basis, you're still accountable. So having some kind of regular oversight of what's going on. Make sure the AI reports back to you when it's encountered any difficulties or when it's unsure. Maybe you put in a little flag there that says, look, if you're not completely happy, AI, with how this particular piece of information is going to go out, flag it up to me and we'll have a conversation. Literally treat it as though it is a new member of staff. So AI automation is an incredibly powerful thing that is going to enable us to scale the good stuff at huge scale that is unprecedented. But it doesn't mean that we're out of a job and it doesn't mean that we're obsolete. It means actually, as marketers, we're even more important because we have to have this overview of actually what's going on. So regularly checking in, regularly getting reports from the AI so that if there are any sensitivities to privacy, to data holding, to transparency, to the ethics that we're talking about here, then we can be accountable because we'll be in the know. And ask the AI, say, kind of what happened there? What went wrong? Can you give me some evaluation as to what we could do differently next time? And again, this is what you would do with an assistant, isn't it? So you do it with your AI too. It's a very similar mindset. I think a lot of people think, oh, it's technology and oh, I'm not that technical. It isn't. The interfaces have been built for us. Those prompt engineering prompt boxes are designed there to give us a simple conversational interface to make this stuff work. So there's a really great positive smile on our faces as we go in and we start the work in collaboration with our AIs. That's the important way to kind of view this and think about it. And of course, there are a lot of tools and a lot of things happening around us that are going to help us and make our life easier. Now we know this is a thing, and now we know this is really super important. And it comes before all of the hype about using AI for creativity and your next video on Instagram and things like that. This is all about actually getting the solid structure and foundation in place. So when we do those things, we're doing it from a reliable baseline. We're not just jumping in and then making making mistakes in public. We're actually getting this right in the background first. So we've got the platforms and all these technology providers doing their best. I mean, they are literally, of course, because they are financial powerhouses. So they want to get this right for commercial reasons, but they also want to get this right generally for the right reasons. And you listen to all of the CEOs from Sam Altman to all the others, and they're all talking about doing this for open source, doing this for, the best for humanity. And I genuinely think overall, in the most cases, that is a genuine kind of reason that they are in business and doing this stuff, is because they have this view that in the future, this is going to be a brave new world that we need to take really responsibly. And of course, the regulators are there working again in parallel with them. They're checking how they're working. They're checking how we as businesses at the front end of using this stuff are working as well. So governments, very much as the drivers behind a lot of these regulators, are cracking down on the other side of what we're talking about here, the unethical AI. This EU AI Act that I mentioned earlier is categorizing AI systems by their risk level and regulating already some of the high risk applications. So that may or may not on a day-to-day basis apply to you and I, but we can, as an actionable step, make sure that we're watching very, very closely these new, and they are brand new. There isn't something I can say, oh, look, here's the case study book of all the people who have fallen foul of the regulations and stuff. They are all, as we are, making this up as we go. But staying close to this stuff is really important, so you never miss a trick and you can get this stuff right from the word go. So maybe another actionable step is you keep a watch on all of these regulations and watch how AI comes into the mix here. And it is literally on a day-to-day, hour-by-hour basis, it's being built around us. Is you maybe develop an internal AI compliance checklist. Maybe take a step back and use your AI, invite the AI to the meeting and say, look, we need to develop this little checklist based around the current regulations, which maybe we'll ask you AI to go back in and check on a weekly basis just to make sure we're always working from the latest. That would be good, wouldn't it? Because then you don't have to do all the hard yards. You just need to oversee this, again, using the AI in collaboration, and say, look, can you provide this AI compliance checklist so that actually we're always kind of working and checking ourselves against what the regulators are requiring of us and what our customers require of us, so that we're always compliant. So whilst I'm using quite a lot of emerging kind of terminology here that maybe is not that familiar, the AI can help us to unpick it. And this is something I'm not just saying that you should do, is actually I'm doing this myself as well. And I'm kind of creating this kind of checklist out of this very process that I'm describing, so that, I always know that I've got just that little few extra steps versus my competitors. So I always know one or two things more than the competition, who are kind of chasing behind me as much as yours are chasing behind you. And of course, what do they say is, if you're out in the ocean swimming and a shark's coming, you only need to be able to swim slightly faster than your friend. It's that kind of thing from a competitive basis. As long as you're just that one or two steps in front of the industry, hey, you're winning. That's the point. So this is all about just staying mindful and keeping, at the forefront of this. So the kind of best practices at the moment are that we're thinking about this from a personalization perspective. 80% of consumers want AI-driven personalization, according to PricewaterhouseCoopers, but 60% feel it's invasive. That's an interesting one, isn't it? So we're going through a transition here. This is not going to be easy. This journey is not going to be the most simple thing. So maybe here, as you build this compliance checklist, as you start to roll out some of these clever, super clever, let's face it, AI opportunities, maybe you balance the personalization that you can do with AI with your customers' choice and consent. Maybe check in with some of your customer friendlies, maybe do a few little focus groups and say, look, we could offer you these things, but we're going to need this data from you. And how are you feeling about this at the moment? Would the value that this would bring to you, would that kind of offset the extra stuff that we're going to need from you, or the maybe perceived risk, if there is one, about us holding this information about you? It'll mean that we can do more value, we think, but what do you think, customer? So maybe have those conversations. And then maybe, as we said a little bit earlier, offer this kind of customization of the control. through AI recommendations that you could make. So a customer can choose version A, which is their traditional interaction with you, versus option B, which is this new emerging, more personalized, but actually requires a deeper relationship, AI driven, to give them the option. Maybe that's another thing to test. That could get interesting, couldn't it? So again, when we talk about this collaboration, it's collaborating with the AIs themselves to become a more ethical AI marketer, but it's also collaborating with other stakeholders. So internally, as we've seen before, certainly through your supply chain, but definitely with customers. If you really want to take this forward confidently, knowing how your customers perceiving what you're doing, again, basic, fundamental marketing, but we shouldn't lose sight of it when it comes to the AI thing here. And then ultimately, really what we're saying here is that this is enhancing, not replacing human talent. So this whole thing is a collaborative thing, and it should augment our creativity and our thinking and our ideas and our innovation, not replace it. Don't just think, oh, AI is here, so all my ideation of the next projects or the next kind of campaigns is just going to be taken away from me. No, I mean, you can use AI for idea generation and a bit of automation, absolutely, but retain human oversight. You're still in charge. And I always find myself coming full circle back to this thing that the AI here, if you're going to do this ethically, the AI is your assistant or your team of assistants if you have multiple AIs specializing in certain things. And then be transparent whenever you're using AI generated output, content, ideas. You should be really, I guess, saying to your line management and your team, look, we've been working with AI here, and we've come up with this incredible opportunity that we've got some evidence based on the numbers. We've done some forecasts again with AI. We've got this kind of campaign that we're going to suggest that we do. We think here this is the likely outcome from it. And we've done this, co-created with AI. And just leave it at that. I mean, this whole idea about being transparent enables other people to both see the value of that co-creation, but also understand where now maybe the human needs to just come in and make that final decision. So we're going to kind of use the evidence, but we're not going to be dependent on the evidence. That's a really important step to take forward here. And there are many brands doing it this way. I mean, I've got a few examples here. L'Oreal, Adobe, Bird law firm, really, providing ethical AI guidelines for enterprise AI. It's well worth checking out the twobirds.com website there for that. Spotify that I mentioned earlier, Tesla, Google, all of these organizations have got really good case studies. And these are some of the brands leading this whole approach to ethical AI. And of course, you'll see the counter argument, which says, oh, well, they're not doing this and they're not doing that. And the reason you hear about these brands and that there is a counter argument is because they're being open, and you could argue honest, but certainly transparent in their journey. So we can learn from them and maybe learn with them in terms of the things that they're uncovering for their customers as they go through this journey. As I said earlier, this is a playbook that you can see there are some of the world's biggest brands here in this list. And even those guys haven't figured it out yet. But you, listening and watching this, are actually on that journey with them. So this is exciting. It really is a huge opportunity that enables us to really take the next steps to developing an ethical AI action plan. So here are some of the 5 steps I'd say to starting to build your plan. So you might want to note these down because these would give you a step-by-step approach that maybe you take to your next team meeting, maybe have a conversation with some colleagues and kind of see whether this resonates, because at some point you will, if you're using AI, you'll need to consider these things. So what better than starting now before you really get too deep into it? So conduct an AI audit to look at where you might identify some bias, where you could identify transparency, and definitely where you need to increase your compliance. Implement a privacy-first AI in marketing strategies. In other words, always thinking the data that you're collecting and the way you're going to use that data is private and secure first before you start to think about, oh, well, if we had this data, we could do that. Think about privacy concerns first. Train teams in AI ethics and responsible innovation. In other words, having those AI guidelines are really, really key here. So we've moved in the last 12 months from, as marketers, having brand guidelines to having AI guidelines too. So if you're early on that journey, it is now the time to start thinking about that too. And maybe blend the two, wouldn't that be great? So you've got AI brand guidelines, if you see what I mean, where the things become just everything that we do day to day. Develop clear AI accountability policies. So again, sort of training everybody to think, okay, we're using AI, we're hopefully using it honestly and authentically, but ultimately, if we use AI, the buck stops with us as humans. So our accountability is that we're responsible for the input, we're responsible for the training, we're responsible for any biases that come out of that. And so we've self-checked, we've monitored, we've done due diligence. That's the phrase to be thinking about. So accountability stops with us, not the AI. And then again, that moves us into a more kind of managerial position with our AI, where the AI is our set of assistants, our little team around us. And of course, as a manager of that team, you would be responsible. And ensuring that AI enhances, not replaces, human decision making. I always like to think that AI can do the insights and the building of the intelligence around the data and the reporting, but the word evaluation, I want to own that. So I'm going to evaluate what the AI comes up with, and then hopefully maybe even working in hand with the AI, but we're going to come to this collaborative decision as to the priorities going forward. So it's not replacing us, it's complementing us. And that is really key. So the future of ethics in AI marketing. I mean, it is a compliance issue and it's a trust building strategy. There's a lot of upside here. You can get competitive advantage by just simply doing this stuff. And by simply doing this stuff, you're doing the right thing. This is mindful marketing in the way that I would define it. This is about being conscious and aware. You will make mistakes, you will have gaps, and that's fine as long as your intention is true and good. And responsible AI will define the brands that last. Tim Berners-Lee, the founder, if you like, the grandfather of the internet, said, AI is the future, but the future must be ethical. So my final challenge to you to round this off with that little ethical marketing action plan there is to you to say, how will you make AI-driven marketing more ethical?